There was a time when the only changes known to this river were season to season and day to day. But a river that runs through the heart of a growing marketplace, only 100 miles from the open sea, is bound to change. Of the open space that once lined the Willamette in Portland, what remains? On the east bank of this river, between the Ross Island and Selwood bridges, lies Oaks Bottom, the last natural wetland in the city. In earlier days, it would have been known as a marsh or a swamp. Its character is influenced by the rise and fall of the Willamette River. Oaks Bottom today survives as a unique habitat within the city of Portland. And after years of debate, the future of these 167 acres is still unclear.
In those early days, 1914, 15, there was no one interested in Oaks Bottom. At that time, it was just a swamp, a lot of ducks. But as far as people going down there, as far as I know, they never did.
Back in the mid-1930s, the bottomland had been a source of mosquitoes and periodic high water, but as an asset to the city, not much thought, at least not much was said about it.
When I was going to Oaks Bottoms when I was a kid, which was about 1952 to 1956 or so, Oaks Bottom was kind of like the wilderness, and it was like an expedition to go into Oaks Bottom. We didn't know what was down there, really. We had conjured up images of alligators and everything else, but of course there wasn't any of those. But there was a lot of things down there, and there still are.
There might have been some quail or some pheasants down in there, but I didn't see them, so I don't know anything about them.
It's nice that the ducks and the water birds and whatnot have a place to go and not have somebody throwing bread at them all day long.
What I'm asking is, what would anyone do down there when there's just ducks flying around in high water? Well, you just don't take too much interest.
The childhood recollections of the lowland were merely just a place to go, and I guess I wasn't trained to think of what they might mean to myself and to the city in the future. But now, when I go down there, I look around and can appreciate what we have. And the more you look at it, the more you realize it's worth a lot.
The whole river used to be like Oaks Bottom. It used to be just a rough, brushy, nasty swamp on both sides of the river until it got up to the cataracts. And this is probably the last little vestige of that.
Over the past 25 years, there have been numerous controversies regarding the use of Oaks Bottom. The efforts of local citizens to preserve this riverine wetland are better understood in light of the history of the Willamette River in Portland. As the last wetland in the city, Oaks Bottom represents the Willamette of years ago, when the river basin was thousands of acres of wetlands and lakes. In the 1850s, when Oregon was still a territory, a settlement on the west shore of the Willamette comprised the city of Portland. At that time, the river was considerably wider, with inlets and shoals lining both banks. Between 1853 and 1855, legislation granted land to homesteaders in parcels up to 640 acres. In this fashion, areas along the river to the north and south of the city were claimed. The downtown harbor development began with the port serving as a shipping center for the Tualatin Valley farmlands. This valley to the west was the city's first source of goods for export, as it was the only agricultural region with access to Portland by road. The waterfront became a wharf of mills, granaries, and warehouses, along with lumber and shipbuilding businesses to accommodate the new trade. As in most American cities of the 1860s, the waterfront gave way to the railroad, so that by 1880, East and West Portland were lined with rail yards. With the influx of the rail companies, the population jumped from 21,000 in 1885 to 50,000 in 1888. In 1888, Portland was noted as being the metropolis of the Northwest and the third richest city in the world in proportion to the wealth per capita of population. A major change occurred at this time as Cooch Lake was filled and the Grand Union Station was built. By 1891, the area's population had boomed to 150,000. In February of 1891, the Port Commission was established, and in July of that same year, Portland, East Portland, and Albina consolidated as one city. By the turn of the century, the Willamette River basin to the north and south of the city was still relatively natural. With so much of the riverfront open to development, the next period of Portland's history would prove to be one of public versus private interests. Despite the annual spring flooding, the downtown harbor had continued to extend along the waterfront with more warehouses, docks, and small businesses. The harbor began to stretch northward toward the bend in the river at Swan Island, where in some places the channel was only a foot deep. The commercial need for a deeper channel, not only here but all along the river, prompted dredging, and as a consequence, surrounding lakes and wetlands were filled. Dredging operations eventually brought the course of the river from the east side to the west side of Swan Island, and the dredge spoils helped to fill 900-acre Giles Lake in 1905. In June of that same year, Giles Lake had hosted the Lewis and Clark Centennial Exposition and Oriental Fair. On a scale of a World's Fair with thousands of exhibits and attractions, both national and international, the exposition lasted 4 months and was attended by more than 2.5 million visitors. In a matter of months after the fair's end, all but one of the pavilions had been torn down in preparation for the filling of the lake. The Oregon Journal in 1913 accounted, "Quietly and without ostentation, Giles Lake has been transformed from a muddy and unattractive sheet of water into a modern, up-to-date industrial center." Everybody realized that it would be a huge undertaking to transform this body of water into dry land, but that it would be done someday, no one doubted. Directly to the north of Giles Lake, Kitteridge and Doane Lakes were also filled as ground for the expanding Linton district. Since 1915, Linton had begun to change in character from a small town to an industrial center. This period of history, from 1900 to 1925, was also alive with numerous plans for city parks. Many of these plans included large tracts of waterfront, especially in the Ross and Swan Island areas. None of these plans materialized. From the 1920s through the 1940s, the newly filled lakes and wetlands experienced the greatest development. In 1927, Swan Island became the site of Portland's first airport, dedicated by Charles Lindbergh. This remained the city's airport until 1941, when, with the war effort, Swan Island was transformed into an island of shipbuilders. Production here was so extensive that entire housing projects were built on and around Swan Island to accommodate the wartime workers. The largest of these was in the Giles Lake District, where the population reached 10,000, the largest housing project ever assembled within a city. The surrounding areas grew industrial overnight. Albina, Mock's Bottom, Portsmouth, St. John's, and Swan Island on the east side, Linton, Giles Lake, and Union Station on the west side, all began to merge, forming the face of a new world port. By 1955, development of the river basin is no longer synonymous with the need for a deeper channel. The channel has been physically contained for commerce. In the downtown area, small businesses and docks had long since moved back off the water, making way for the new seawall. With former problems of navigation and flooding finally controlled, port growth was now uninhibited. Today, we see the Willamette River and Portland converted from what was once a series of shallow meanders and lakes to a well-defined and diverse industrial port. At the confluence of the Willamette and Columbia Rivers is the newest of the industrial districts. Acquired in 1966 by the Port of Portland, Rivergate has so far claimed Ramsey Lake. Smith and Bybee Lakes, recently annexed by the city, perhaps await a similar fate. With Portland's waterfront well established, the scarcity of open space along the Willamette becomes increasingly noticeable. Because the harbor grew from downtown northward, the area south of the Ross Island Bridge was almost entirely left out of the early dredging operations. Some filling did take place in 1907 for Oaks Amusement Park, and the ongoing dredging of Ross Island will eventually affect the course of the river. But this part of the river has until now remained unindustrialized. Immediately east of Ross Island and behind Oaks Park, Oaks Bottom is Portland's last opportunity to preserve a wetland habitat within the city. The city acquired this land in 1950. Among early considerations for the site was an exposition center, which later became the Memorial Coliseum, built in northeast Portland. In 1959, with Oregon's centennial, plans were drawn up for a pioneer park, including historical museums and recreational facilities. While the city still considers the possibility, these plans have never been enacted.
This is a city park. It's 167 acres. The first 100 acres came about as a result of a trade. And this was the first 100 acres in this general vicinity, which is in the south end of the park. It's what's considered the wetland or the swampland area. The northernmost part of the park, which was acquired as part of the Greenway program. This is 47 acres, which was purchased from the Drake property. and it had been filled previously, and that's in this location here. Now, the main purpose of this whole park was to create open space in the downtown core.
In the 50s, community interest in Oaks Bottom began to grow. One of the first signs of this was a study committee appointed by the city in 1959, made up of local residents.
Well, I was appointed to a committee to study the use of the land and what could be done after the city had acquired it through a trade with PGE. The land actually cost the city nothing because they traded 3.5 acres that was worthless to the city and acquired out of it about 80 acres of land. We worked on this committee for a number of years and considered many different things for it. We considered having Japanese gardens down there prior to them ever going in up above. We considered canals through there. We always did want to keep as much of the wildlife as we could there and still have the land for the use of as many people as possible. At the present time, it seems to be that most people would like the whole area left for a wildlife refuge. Maybe this is the best thing for it. My only thought on this is that how many people are going to be able to enjoy it? Is it going to be just for a few? Just for those that can get down there? How about the people that can't get out onto a walkway that would love to see this sort of thing? They pay taxes for this property too.
When the dirt from the stadium freeway was brought in, there were plans for a great industrial park, but I, for one, and many of the neighbors didn't like that idea. Petitions were signed and submitted to the authorities requesting that this land be retained for park-type use. Initially, the city council was listening to the plans for the industrial park, but when the people attended the meetings, busloads went down, there was standing room only, even support from other neighborhoods. The council did listen and denied the industrial park.
We moved to the Selwood Moreland area in the fall of 1970. And one of the reasons we had purchased the house was that we had checked that the property was park property owned by the city, and we liked that idea. And after we had lived in the house for about a month, it was a beautiful Thanksgiving weekend, and we were awakened in the morning by the roar of motorcycles before dawn, and it went on all day. We had to use the telephone by going into a closet because of the noise, and it was very distressing to think that we were going to have to live with that. And so after Christmas, I took a petition around and I got 48 signatures, and I talked with people and they felt very discouraged. They'd tried to get something done and they felt that there was nothing that was going to be done and that nobody could handle the motorcycle problem.
In the early 1960s, the Selwood Moreland Improvement League, or SMILE, was established as a forum for the voicing of local concerns. Oaks Bottom quickly became this neighborhood association's chief priority.
Maybe to review our long-time support for that area and the maintenance of that area. In the mid-60s, Lady Bird Johnson came out and made some sort of proposal or recommendation that that become a wildlife or bird sanctuary. And then in the early 70s, we supported and paid for the Witchy Report.
Excuse me, Ruth. I wasn't a member of SMILE at the time that report was made, and I wonder if you would explain what it is.
Okay, the Ritchie Report was done by graduate students at Portland State University through the Urban Studies program. They divided into 5 groups, and each group came up with a plan for possible use of that area. And one of the plans included the highest density use of apartment buildings and to the least density use, which was the wildlife use.
And SMILE at that time supported the wildlife sanctuary concept, and I would really encourage that we start, at least with seed money, to put signs up so that it can be identified and used properly. What's your pleasure?
But the idea of Oaks Bottom as a wildlife habitat predates SMILE and other would-be users.
The Audubon Society has had a historical interest in this area for many years. We've, in the old days, our members used to tell us about coming riding in the trolley out here on the open-sided cars and getting off and taking bird hikes in the areas. They'd get the trolley down at downtown Portland and then ride out here to use the trolley. And we've been concerned about the area. It's been a place we've had a lot of bird hikes for over the past years, and we've always used this area as part of our Christmas count, and it's a place we've always come to see a lot of birds in the city of Portland, and we'd like to see it maintained as a wildlife sanctuary, and that's where our interest began, and that's why we're involved in the area.
It was about 6 to 8 years ago that a group of us got together, including the Audubon Society, the Mazamas, Selwood Smile Group, Oregon State Game Commission, and other people, decided we'd like to do something to use Oaks Bottom as an educational situation. One of the final results that came up was that we would propose that we would build an educational house or classroom down on the south end of Oaks Bottom, at which time various schools that wanted to could bring their students down for a visit. There's many things related down there that besides science, social studies and health and art and even possibly geology and such. But each time the funding we asked for, which was to fund our proposal down here, just didn't come about. So as we exist today, Oaks Bottom's still as it was 6 years ago.
A wetland is a very special place because it's a boundary between water and land. And because it's a boundary, it brings together at this place species that are found on land, species that are found in water, and a few species that are adapted specially to the boundary itself and aren't found anywhere else. It's also an area that's very rich in nutrients. Water coming downstream brings nutrients, water running across the land brings nutrients, and a lot of them are deposited here, which makes it a very rich area and contributes to the existence of so many species in a small area. I think the most important thing about wetlands is that because there's so much diversity, because so many things can be found here, so many things exist here, there's so much to lose.
In regard to land use, there are three distinct areas of Oaks Bottom for consideration: the wetland, the south fill, and the north fill. As it now stands, the question is one of compatibility. Can any one area be developed without affecting the whole?
This is the North Fill, and it's a part that the Audubon Society believes should be a part of any wildlife-oriented recreational area or sanctuary that the city develops here on the Oaks Bottom area. We have several reasons why we think this should be a part included in the sanctuary, and I think one of the important one is that this area in itself provides a unique kind of habitat that you can't find in other parts of the city of Portland. It's an open meadowy area right in downtown Portland. You can find pheasants down here, red-tailed hawk, valley quail, some goldfinches, purple martins, and a lot of other birds that you don't find in other parts of Portland. This may look like a deserted area and not much going on, but really in essence quite a bit's going on down there. And I know the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife has got some money together, budgeted to develop this as a wildlife area. We can do a lot more for the wildlife on this area than we could in other parts of the Oaks Bottoms.
The progress of the development for this Oaks Pioneer Park is pretty much delayed, primarily because of the Audubon Society's proposal. This proposal naturally was all-encompassing in that they wanted to take in all the area which is now considered Oaks Pioneer Park of 167 acres. We feel that there's a certain amount of validity in providing additional types of activities for other people instead of just for one usage.
If we build roads in this and turn this into other uses or higher uses like baseball diamonds or some of the other things that have been proposed, that this will draw a lot of people into the Oaks Bottom area that would normally not come into the area and using it as a wildlife area. They'll come down to play baseball or whatever they're going to be doing, and then they'll spread out. They'll be able to drive closer to the wetlands, and by putting all these people down there, will bring the wetland area into more pressure on it from people who were not down there originally to look at wildlife.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you'll recall that during the approximately 3 years ago, we did a study of Oaks Bottom area, and during that study, we outlined 3 different activity areas. Our basic policy out of that study was that any activities that occur in the North Fill area and the South Fill area be compatible with the nature area, which was the wetlands. The Audubon Society has made certain determinations regarding that. They have a large amount of expertise. They have more expertise than the Parks Department in that regard, and we have supported consistently their position. Unless the Parks Department can come forward and show us in some manner that the certain activities would be compatible, then I think we have to continue to support the Audubon's position.
Parks have a lot of different uses. And I think we have 1 million people in this metropolitan area, and it's going to, they say, increase to 2 million in the next 25 years or so. And those people are going to be completely isolated from areas where they can see natural habitat and wetlands. I think it's a magnificent opportunity to preserve an area in Portland where people can observe these things. After all, we have other parks for other purposes. You can go to Forest Park or Laurelhurst Park or for different purposes in the city. And I think Portland's pursuing a very sensible plan for the use of parks, not trying to make every park do everything.